2 Kings chapter 20. Put your house in order. In those days Hezekiah became mortally ill. So Isaiah the prophet, son of Amoz, came to him and said to him, Thus says Adonai, put your house in order, for you are dying and will not live. Then he turned his face to the wall and prayed to Adonai, saying, Please, Adonai, remember how I have walked before you in truth and with a whole heart, and I have done what is good in your eyes. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. Then it came to pass, before Isaiah was gone out of the middle court, that the word of Adonai came to him, saying, Return and say to Hezekiah, the leader of my people, Thus says Adonai, the God of your father David, I have heard your prayer and I have seen your tears. Behold, I am glad going to heal you. On the third day you will go up to the house of Adonai. Then I will add 15 years to your life. I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Assyria. I will defend this city for my own sake and for my servant David's sake. Then Isaiah said, Take a cake of figs. So they took one and laid it on the boil, and he recovered. Then Hezekiah said to Isaiah, What will be the sign that Adonai will heal me, and that I should go up to the house of Adonai on the third day? And Isaiah said, This will be a sign to you from Adonai, that Adonai will do this word he has spoken. Should the shadow go forward 10 steps or go back 10 steps? Hezekiah answered, It's easy for a shadow to go forward 10 steps. No, let the shadow turn back 10 steps. Then Isaiah the prophet cried to Adonai, and he brought the shadow 10 steps backward, by which it had gone down on the sundial of Ahaz. Hezekiah shows his treasury to Babylon. At that time, Berodach Baladan, son of King Baladan of Babylon, sent a letter and a present to Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. Now Hezekiah listened to them, and showed them his entire treasure house, the silver and the gold, the spices and the precious oil, and his armory, and everything that was found in his treasuries. There was nothing in his house and all his dominion that Hezekiah did not show them. Then Isaiah the prophet came to King Hezekiah and asked him, What did these men say, and from where did they come to you? Hezekiah replied, They have come to me from a far country, from Babylon. Then he asked, What have they seen in your house? Hezekiah said, They have seen everything in my house. There is nothing in my treasuries that I didn't show them. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, Hear the word of Adonai. Behold, days are coming, when evening everything in your house, which your fathers have stored up to this day, will be carried to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says Adonai. Moreover, some of your descendants, who will issue from you, you will father, will be taken away, and will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then Hezekiah said to Isaiah, Good is the word of Adonai which you have spoken. For he thought, Is it not so, if there will be shalom and security in my days? Now the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and all his might, including how he made the pool and the tunnel that brought the water into the city, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? So Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and his son Manasseh became king in his place. 2 Kings chapter 21. Wicked kings Manasseh and Amon. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hephzibah, but he did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, following the abominations that Adonai had dispossessed before Bani Israel. For he rebuilt the shrines that his father Hezekiah had destroyed, and he erected altars for Baal, and made an Asherah pole, as King Ahab of Israel had done, and bowed down to all the hosts of heaven and worshipped them. He even built altars in Adonai's house, where Adonai had said, In Jerusalem I will put my name. He built altars for all the hosts of heaven in the 2 courts of the house of Adonai. He also made his son pass through the fire, practiced soothsaying and divination, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in Adonai's eyes to provoke him. Then he set up and carved an image of Asherah that he made in the house, about which Adonai had said to David and to his son Solomon, In the house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen from all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. No longer will I cause the feet of Israel to wander from the land which I gave their fathers, if only they will keep doing all that I have commanded them, and the whole Torah that my servant Moses commanded them. But they did not listen. So Manasseh led them astray to do more evil than the nations that Adonai had destroyed before Bani Israel. Then Adonai spoke through his servants, the prophets, saying, Since King Manasseh of Judah has done these abominations, and has outdone the wickedness, all that the Amorites who were before him did, and has also made Judah sin with his idols, therefore thus says Adonai, God of Israel, Behold, I am bringing such evil in Jerusalem and Judah, that whoever hears of it, both his ears will tingle. I will stretch over Jerusalem the land of Samaria, and the plummet of the house of Ahab, and I will utterly wipe away Jerusalem as one wipes down a dish, wiping it and turning it upside down. Then I will cast off the remnant of my inheritance, and hand them over to their enemies. They will become plunder and spoil to all their enemies. For they have done such evil in my eyes, and kept provoking me to anger since this day their fathers came out of Egypt up to this day. Moreover, Manasseh shed so much innocent blood until he filled Jerusalem with blood from one end to another, in addition to his sin which he made Judah sin in doing what was evil in Adonai's eyes. Now the rest of the deeds of Manasseh, all that he did, and his sin that he committed, Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? Then Manasseh slept with his fathers and was buried in the garden of his own palace, in the garden of Uzzah. Then his son Amon became king in his place. Amon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned 2 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Meshillemeth, daughter of Haruz of Jotbah. He did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, as his father Manasseh had done. So he walked in all the ways that his father had walked in, and worshipped the idols that his fathers had worshipped, and bowed down to them. He abandoned Adonai, God of his fathers, and did not walk in the way of Adonai. Then Amon's courtiers conspired against him and assassinated the king in his own palace. But the people of the land put to death all the conspirators against King Amon, and the people of the land made his son Josiah king in his place. Now the rest of the deeds of Amon which he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? Then he was buried in the tomb in the garden of Uzzah, and his son Josiah became king in his place. 2 Kings chapter 23. Josiah and a discovered Torah scroll. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jedidah, daughter of Adaiah of Bazkath. Now he did what was right in the eyes of Adonai, and walked in all the ways of his father David, and turned not aside to the right or to the left. It came to pass in the 18th year of King Josiah that the king sent Shaphan, son of Azaliah, son of Meshullam the scribe, to the house of Adonai, saying, Go up to Hilkiah the Kohen Gadol, and let him weigh the silver that has been brought into the house of Adonai, which the doorkeepers have gathered from the people. Then let them give it into the hand of the workmen appointed to oversee the work on the house of Adonai, and let them in turn give it to the workmen that are in the house of Adonai to repair the damages to the house, to the carpenters, builders, and masons, and for buying timber and cut stone to repair the house. However, there was no accounting made with them for the silver given to their hand, for they dealt faithfully. Hilkiah the Kohen Gadol said to Shaphan the scribe, I have found a scroll of the Torah in the house of Adonai. So Hilkiah gave the scroll to Shaphan, who read it. Then Shaphan the scribe came to the king and brought back word to the king, and said, Your servants have emptied out the silver that was found in the house, and have given it to the hand of the workmen appointed to oversee and work on the house of Adonai. Shaphan the scribe also told the king, saying, Hilkiah the Kohen has given me a scroll. Then Shaphan read it before the king. After the king heard the words of the Torah scroll, he tore his clothes. Then the king commanded Hilkiah the Kohen, Ahikam, son of Shaphan, Achbor, son of Micaiah, Shaphan the scribe, and Asaiah, the king's servant, saying, Go, inquire of Adonai for me, for the people and for all of Judah, about the words of this scroll that was found. For great is the wrath of Adonai that is kindled against us, since our fathers have not obeyed the word of this book, to do everything written here that concerns us. Consulting Huldah the prophetess. So Hilkiah the Kohen, Ahikam, Achbor, Shaphan, and Asaiah went to Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, son of Tikvah, son of Harhas, keeper of the wardrobe. She was living in the second quarter of Jerusalem, and spoke with her. She said to them, Thus says Adonai, the God of Israel, tell the man that sent you to me, Thus says Adonai, Behold, I am bringing disaster on the place and on its inhabitants and all the worlds of the scroll that the king of Judah read. For they have forsaken me, and burned incense to other gods, in order to provoke me with all the work of their hands. Therefore my wrath has been kindled against this place, and it will not be quenched. But to the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of Adonai, thus will you say to him, Thus says Adonai, God of Israel, As for the words that you have heard, because your heart was softened, and you humbled yourself before Adonai, when you heard what I spoke against this place and against its inhabitants, that they should become a desolation and a curse, and because you have also torn your clothes and wept before me, I also have heard you, declares Adonai. Therefore, behold, I will gather to your fathers, and you will be gathered to your grave in Shalom, so your eyes will not see all the disaster I am bringing on this place. Then they brought back word to the king. 2 Kings chapter 23. Josiah renews the covenant. And the king sent forth, they gathered all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem to him. The king went up to the house of Adonai, and all the men of Judah, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, the Kohanim and the prophets, all the people, young and old, and he read their hearing And he read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant which was found in the house of Adonai. And the king stood by the pillar and cut a covenant before Adonai to follow Adonai, keep his mitzvah, his laws, and his decrees with all their heart and soul, in order to fulfill the words of this covenant that were written in the scroll. So all the people stood for the covenant. And the king commanded Hilkiah, the Kohen Gadol, the Kohanim of the second order, and the doorkeepers to bring out of the temple of Adonai all the vessels made for Baal and Asherah and all the hosts of heaven. And he burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and took their ashes to Bethel. He stopped the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained from burning incense in the high places in the towns of Judah and around Jerusalem, as well as those burning incense to Baal, the sun, the moon, the constellations, and to all the hosts of heaven. Then he brought out the Asherah pole from the house of Adonai to the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem, burned it in the Kidron Valley, ground it to dust, and threw its dust over the graves of the common people. Then he tore down the quarters of the male cult prostitutes that had been in the house of Adonai, where the women had been weaving coverings for the Asherah. Then he brought all the priests from the towns of Judah and defiled the high places where the priests had burnt incense, from Geba to Beersheba. He also broke down the high places of the gates that were in the entrance of the gates of Joshua, the city governor, which were on one's left as one entered the city gate. Nevertheless, the priests of the high places did not go up to the altar of Adonai in Jerusalem, but they did eat in Matzat with their kinsmen. Next he defiled Topheth, which is in the Ben Hinnom valley, so that no one might make his son or daughter pass through the fire for Molech. Then he did away with the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun at the entrance of the house of Adonai, and the colonnades by the chamber of the officers, Nethan-Melech, and he burned the chariots of the sun with fire. The king also tore down the altars made by the kings of Judah on the roof, the upper chamber of Ahaz, and the altars that Manasseh had made in the two courtyards of the house of Adonai. He smashed them suddenly there, and threw their dust into the Kidron Valley. The king also desecrated the shrines facing Jerusalem to the south of the Mount of Destruction, which King Solomon of Israel had built for Ashtaroth, the abomination of the Zidonians, for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. He smashed the pillars and cut down the Asherah poles and filled their places with human bones. Prophecy fulfilled at Bethel. Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel and the shrine built by Jeroboam son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin, that altar and the shrine he demolished too. He burned the shrine and ground it to dust and burned up the Asherah. Then as Josiah looked around, he saw the burial caves that were there on the mountain, so he sent and took the bones out of the tombs and buried them on the altar, thus desecrating it, as was the word that Adonai, which the man of God had proclaimed, who foretold it. Then he asked, "What is this monument I see?" So the men of the town told him, "It is the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and proclaimed all these things to you that you have done to the altar of Bethel. Let him rest," he said, "let no one disturb his bones." So they left his bones undisturbed, along with the bones of the prophet who came from Samaria. Josiah also removed all the shrines of the high places that the king of Israel had built in the towns of Samaria to provoke. He did it to them just as he had done in Bethel. All the priests of the high places there he slaughtered on the altars and burned human bones on them. Then he returned to Jerusalem, and the king commanded all the people, saying, "Celebrate the Passover to Adonai your God, as it is written in the book of the covenant. For no Passover like this had been celebrated from the days of the judges, of those who judged Israel, or in all the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. But in the 18th year of the king of Josiah, the Passover was observed for Adonai in Jerusalem. Moreover, Josiah got rid of the necromancers and the mediums, the teraphim and the idols, and all the detestable things that were seen in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem, in order to confirm the words of the Torah that were written in the scroll that Hilkiah the Kohen found in the house of Adonai. Before him there he had never been a king like him, who turned to Adonai with all his heart, and with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the Torah of Moses, nor has any king like him risen since Josiah's death. Nevertheless, Adonai did not turn from the fury of his great wrath, which burned against Judah, because of all that Manasseh had provoked him. Adonai said, "I will banish Judah, also from my presence as I banished Israel, and I have spurned the city, Jerusalem, which I chose, and the house about which I had said, my name will be there." And now the rest of the acts of Josiah and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? In his days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to the Euphrates River. King Josiah marched against him, but Necho killed him at Megiddo when he saw him. So his servants carried him dead in a chariot from Megiddo and brought him to Jerusalem and buried him in his own tomb. Judah's decline. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, anointed him and made him king in his father's place. Jehoahaz was 23 years old, and he became king, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah, but he did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, as in all that his ancestors had done. Then Pharaoh Necho imprisoned him at Riblah in the land of Hamath, so he would not reign in Jerusalem. He also imposed on the land a fine of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Then Pharaoh Necho installed Eliakim, son of Josiah, king in place of his father Josiah, and changed his name to Jehoiakim. But he took Jehoahaz away and brought him to Egypt, and he died there. Jehoiakim gave the silver and the gold to Pharaoh, but he taxed the land to give the money in keeping with Pharaoh's command. He exacted the silver and the gold from the people of the land, each according to his assessment, to give it to Pharaoh Necho. Jehoiakim was 25 years old, and he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zebudah, the daughter of Pedaiah of Ramah, but he did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, just as in all his ancestors had done.